Hey everyone, my name is Caleb Dean. I'm currently teaching design at a college near Chicago. I run a design studio called Pen and Lens, where I've been working on a project called Akimbo and creating work under the same pseudonym. This last project, Akimbo, is the form that I'll be taking to speak to you today. As the title of the talk suggests, I'll be discussing what I believe are new typographic environments, and as such, thought I ought to present from one. So let's get started, shall we? I'd like to start with a few definitions. I'm going to talk about articles, repositories, both private and public, cooperatives, and assemblages. Let's take each in turn. First, articles. An article, as I'd like to define it, is a small design piece whose main purpose is to be used elsewhere. Think of it as fodder. The first example of an article is going to be this graphic. This little A, the capital A from a speculative font of mine, is white on a black background and is traditionally used in a software such as InDesign, but for this talk we'll consider an application like Lens Studio or Spark AR, Instagram and Snapchat's softwares for creating face filters. One could also think about these designed works as articles in English grammar. They fill the larger system and string us from one major object to another. Our current expertise is in making articles. Articles are oftentimes so small that we overlook them. But it's important that we acknowledge them as what we are comfortable making and what we're most used to seeing. Articles are then housed in repository, or a repository is the holding place for articles, where they reside in the aloofness of the internet. In some cases, they're obvious and something separate from our tools, while in other cases they're hidden behind a digital curtain or native to the tool. The example I'll use of a public repository is a platform called Giphy. Giphy or Giphy, I suppose it's Giphy, right? Giphy is a site that aggregates millions of GIFs online. And what started as a huge collection of GIFs has grown into the main supplier of GIFs for our everyday use. Think of Instagram or Snapchat stories. Even our Apple messages call upon this repository of GIFs. It's much more economical for these social media platforms to call upon a separate repository than it is to try and house them themselves. An example of a private repository is an augmented reality lenses that both Instagram and Snapchat have developed. Each has their own software and each stores their own effects. So Instagram has a repository of 3D lenses that Snapchat, or any other entity for that matter, can't access, and vice versa. While companies do this as a means to build exclusivity into their social media platform, it multiplies the work for designers and creates ecosystems that the platforms can control entirely. Our third term is cooperative. Where articles are held in repositories, the cooperative is where they come together, though not for a final product. To continue our use of digital examples, Spark AR and Lens Studios are cooperatives. Namely, these are tools that use articles that we either design for their immediate use or call upon repositories to aggregate otherwise disparate articles and to put them together for some use. Most lay social media users will never interact with these in the same way that most magazine readers won't ever interact with Adobe InDesign. And InDesign is probably the perfect metaphor for a cooperative for this design-savvy group. If I saw some artwork, or if I make some artwork in Illustrator or Photoshop an image, I've created an article. Those images, or my articles, live in a carefully organized folder on my desktop, which is their repository. And then I use InDesign, my cooperative, to bring them together for my use. We can, of course, make illustrations and manipulate photos in InDesign, but it's poor practice and most successful when we do that in programs designed to handle those things. This working method means that we can create fewer articles for more proliferations, the sourcing out of our files. That is, however, where I think that the InDesign metaphor ends and where our new environments begin. The aggregators I'm interested in today are Snapchat and Instagram stories, as well as TikTok, Snap Camera, and a growing number of new digital tools, which we'll talk about later. You see, when we publish something in InDesign, or via our traditional methods of print or web design, its final output is largely unchangeable. And if it is changeable, in the case of a variable logo or identity, or a website that's powered by dynamic content, then its output is very carefully controlled and only accessible to a limited number of people. In a digital assemblage, however, this is our fourth term, every person has the ability to create something. An assemblage is a digital tool that a mass user base has access to where they can combine multiple pieces before finally being published. I'll use Instagram as the example, assuming again that it may be the most familiar. When we're making an Instagram story, for example, users are able to first take a picture. They can create their own article either with the built-in camera features or after calling upon a repository of face filters like the one this presentation is done in, or like Giphy or whatever else it may be, some digital objects, right? Once they've created their initial image, they can call on more repositories like Giphy to add GIFs, which are called stickers, or interactive elements from Instagram's own repository, such as polls, sliders, event countdowns, and more. In this way, users are able to assemble an infinite number of graphic works, both interactive and not. Now, I've taken so long to clearly explain this structure because of the rate at which these articles and repositories are multiplying, and to give a common language to each before we talk about it in less familiar environments. I might note, too, that many tools move between these definitions at different moments. The underlying point here is that there is a complicated network of sources and tools that eventually equip a mass user base to create their own works of design. And that's something that's at once exciting and terrifying. I know that the work that students make, I see what they do, and I'm excited that that they have new environments, that they have new programs every day, but I'm also terrified to see what they make and see where it goes. This is to say that our typography has unlimited environments, and that we might not yet know about, and that we are staring basically at an immense potential for new typographic environments. Again, currently, I'm presenting to you with the face filter I've built in Lens Studio. And this is the third presentation I've given like this. Snapchat allows for a tap to change the filter, which in past presentations I've used abstractly in the idea of sequencing, which is the exact same underpinnings of a normal presentation. Not only am I able to use this, but now anyone on Snapchat can use this face filter and add to it in an assemblage of their own. They can pull from other repositories like Giphy to add GIFs. Perhaps most interestingly, anyone with the filter, which is everybody on Snapchat, so hundreds of millions of users, can use the filter and speak or add additional textual content to my visual output. Which leads me to wonder what else might be said with a face filter like this. How does the face filter change the message? Or does the message change the filter? And these are things that interest me to no end. I sort of lose sleep over these things. And the repositories grow with each publication of a new assemblage tool, and they're being added daily. For example, video games. Quite frequently, users are enabled to choose their own outfits or skins. At the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, sales of Animal Crossings from Nintendo soared as users flocked to the game as a way to gather virtually. At a certain point in the game, players are able to create their own clothing, and more importantly, pull from a repository of clothing designs from the community. I, for example, can design clothes, posters, paintings, etc., without even playing the game. And much like an Instagram repository, the users are able to call upon a repository of designs to assemble their own look. Now, this is another example of a private repository that is unique to Animal Crossings. So this is important for many reasons, right? Not only are we equipping people who may not understand how to critically engage culture with visuals, but we're also here to grapple with an understated economic forefront. So let's talk about the new economic environment for type and this type of design. The digital foresight company, and I'm going to butcher their name, please pardon my French, L'Atelier BNP Paribas, has written an extensive article on the virtual economy, which might be a foresight into our new typographic environments and economic environments. From L'Atelier, this is the virtual economy, an agglomeration of sophisticated platforms, fledging and often dubious marketplaces, skilled nixers, volatile assets, and ambitious pioneers that exist or operate uniquely in virtual environments. It sits just out of reach, behind a digital curtain, invisible to most of us. Within it, there is a galaxy of activity and opportunity." End quote. This second to last sentence, "it sits just out of reach, behind a digital curtain, invisible to most of us," should sound really familiar to designers. We've seen this before in the publishing industry. What was once quite exclusive exploded into the public domain, first for designers with the right software, and then to the public with tools that became commonplace. Latelier writes about the virtual economy as a place where digital goods are exchanged for actual money, though oftentimes gets trapped in those economies. Here again, I'll call upon our term of private repository. These digital worlds are creating a space for visual work to enter, and they are the gatekeepers. We can think of typefaces as a common comparison for this group. I am both a purchaser of typefaces from independent type foundries and try to sell typefaces myself. Typefaces are a digital good that gets sold and used, though in reality we're selling the license, and the font files are the ability to exercise that license. Regardless, the virtual economy could work in a similar fashion. What about opening an all-virtual t-shirt store where one licenses QR codes for digital wares? I could sell a t-shirt in Animal Crossing's Minecraft or NBA 2K20. Who wants to deal with that inventory anyways, right? Brands are already doing this, though the partnership comes largely from game creators. An example is the world phenomenon game League of Legends had a character skins designed by Louis Vuitton for their League opening series in 2019. Players were able to purchase and download outfits in-game, which led to a concert where the concert performers were all in the same skins. For my entrepreneurs watching this, the potential is staggering, right? And for my designers watching this, we need to key into the cultural environment this alludes to. So I'll say here, new cultural environment, but there's a question, right? New comes with a question mark because I'm skeptical of the environment is actually new, though the scale is probably new. Reflecting on my own scope of reach, there's quite little consequence in the items I might design. If I design a t-shirt for friends and family, the ripple effects of visual output will be quite small, right? Only my friends and family are going to see that t-shirt, and unless they decide to take a picture and goes viral with their 300 friends, nobody else is going to see it. For a studio who sells shirts, that's limited to the quantity of shirts ordered or made or printed, etc. There's usually a limit to those numbers. In a virtual environment, however, that's not the case. At any given moment, a work of visual communication could be distributed to millions of online users, and in an instance, in the case of the League of Legends output. As such, I believe it's the care that we as designers put into these works increases dramatically. What would happen, for example, if a virtual Trump 2020 shirt goes viral? What about a Blue Lives Matter flag? Or what happens when the assemblage tool doesn't allow media from certain repositories? How are these new environments being maintained and upheld? And, most importantly, how do these things shape our visual typographic environments? Are we prepared to answer these questions as designers and typographers? Again, these are the questions that keep me up at night as an educator and as a designer. Now, I'd like to end this talk with maybe a little less heebie-jeebies and some more optimism. I'd like to end with a scenario we're familiar with, but with a little bit of speculation towards these new environments. Suppose in the future, a client comes to us to design a brand or custom typeface. Instead of a business card, we might design them a face filter. Instead of a web store, we might build them a Facebook shop. Instead of a type specimen delivered via a downloadable PDF that's horribly obscure and sits as a small button on our websites, we might design an AR filter that puts type into users' 3D environment so they can see it in context. Instead of designing a physical apparel that needs to be shipped via a gas-powered car in plastic that'll likely end up in our oceans, we might design them a suite of digital clothes that engage and shape our culture on a larger scale in new and uninspected ways. Thank you.